I survived my first year as a freelancer during one of the weirdest job markets in recent history. So today I want to share with you some things that worked for me and some things that I wish I had known when I was just starting out. This will be a very personal account, so just take what works for you and leave the rest. Before you run off and register your freelance business, I want you to really ask yourself why you want to go freelance. There are no right or wrong answers here, but it can be helpful to get really clear on your motivation, especially when things get tough, which I promise you they will sooner or later. Freelancing is not a silver bullet or some sort of magic pill. Especially recently, I've spoken to quite a few people who are considering freelancing as an option, because as I'm sure we all know, the market has been a little bit tough and some people are struggling to find full-time employment. But the grass is not always greener on the other side. And chances are, if you are struggling right now to find a permanent position, probably clients won't just magically line up at your doorstep either. It can be quite helpful to make a list of your previous jobs and think about what you enjoyed and didn't enjoy about these roles. And then try to ask yourself how these points would change when going freelance. It's also important to keep in mind that full-time employment certainly has its benefits. You have a reliable paycheck coming in at the end of every month, you have a fixed team around you can rely on, and very structured career development opportunities. So you need to ask yourself if freelancing will actually let you do more of the things you love and less of the things you don't enjoy. Try to really find out what excites you about freelancing. Because freelancing is not just another mode of getting paid, it's an entirely different mode of working. I personally went freelance for the freedom and flexibility it provides, to regain control over my schedule a little bit, also to avoid office, politics, and corporate culture to a certain degree. If I want to take a Wednesday afternoon off and work Sunday instead, I can do that. At the beginning of the year, I hopped on a plane to Portugal and didn't even tell anyone about it, because I did not need anyone's permission. One sunny morning, I was sitting on my little balcony on this tiny little remote island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, when all of a sudden it hit me. I had never been this free and this much in control of both my work and my life ever before. There was no manager, no OKR reviews, no performance reviews, no company vision meetings. It was just me and my laptop and the sea right around the corner. And that freedom is a big part of my why. Some people go freelance because they hope to make more money that way, and that is completely valid. We all work to make money. I would still encourage you, however, to find some other incentives, because I think it can be a little bit difficult to rely on money as your sole motivation. Some people are burnt out after spending years in corporate culture, and others are simply excited to explore their more entrepreneurial side. So, whatever your reasons for going freelance are, make sure you define them clearly, because that will help you guide decisions later on. Once you know why you want to go freelance, it is time to get your finances in order and check if freelancing is even financially viable for you. If you don't already know how much you're spending each month, now is definitely the time to figure it out. That should include both your personal expenses as well as any costs required to run your business. I'm assuming that most of us here are probably offering some sort of digital service. And typically the costs to run a business like that are quite low. But you might still need some initial investment, maybe for a laptop or a camera or a home office setup. And then there will be running monthly costs for an accountant or accounting software, a bank account, any sort of tools, licenses, subscriptions you use. Maybe you want to rent an office or a co-working space, conference tickets, training material, books, all these sorts of things. Make a list of every single digital and physical tool you use in your day-to-day work and include that in your list of expenses. Keep in mind that you will now have to cover anything your employer currently pays for, and that includes contributions to both the health insurance and the public pension. The topic of social insurance for freelancers in Germany would go beyond the scope of what we can cover today and also turn this talk into a little bit more of an angry rant. But it is a crucial topic, so please make sure you have a plan for how you want to handle health insurance and the pension. Once you know how much money you need, it is time to figure out how much money you think you can make. And that is largely determined by the market. There are formulas on the internet which tell you how much you should be charging based on your expenses. I personally do not believe in this approach, because your clients do not care if you have a baby on the way, how high your rent is, or whether you like fine dining. All they care about is how much value you provide, and if they can get the same quality somewhere else for cheaper. So if everyone around you charges 50 euros an hour, you need a damn good reason to charge 100 euros an hour. So you need to find out your market value. You can do some research on the internet, but a great way is also to simply talk to your peers. Try to find people in your niche with a similar level of experience and simply inquire about their pricing model. I found the freelance community to be incredibly supportive, and most people won't mind sharing how much they charge. Of course, please be very respectful when asking these kinds of questions, and it might be a little bit easier to get that sort of information from people you already have a connection with. A rule of thumb I sometimes use when communicating my pricing to my clients is, it's completely fine if they flinch a little bit when you tell them how much you charge. If they go a little bit like, that's okay, don't worry about it. If everyone immediately stops the conversation right after you tell them how much you charge, you might be charging a little bit too much. But if everyone just accepts your pricing without even attempting to negotiate, you might actually be undercharging. Next, it is time to figure out how much you think you can sell, whether that is hours or deliverables or some sort of packaged service. Keep in mind that you will not get paid for sick days, vacation, admin tasks, bookkeeping, sending invoices, project acquisition, unexpected downtime between projects, and all these things. So please be very realistic here and err on the side of caution. Just because you are currently working a 40-hour week does not mean you will be able to bill 40 hours a week, and especially not 12 months per year. With all of these numbers, you should now be able how much money you need every year and how much money you can potentially make every year. And with that, you have your estimated profit. Look at these numbers, and at the end of the day, if the math isn't mathing, and somehow your expenses are higher than your expected revenue, then it's time to go back to the drawing board and find a way to either make more money or spend less. One more aspect of financial planning is to have a look at your savings. How long could you survive and keep your business afloat if you had absolutely zero income? There's no magic number of how many months worth of expenses you should have saved. But you need to feel comfortable and confident that you can pay your bills, even if the start might be a little bit rocky and you might have little to no income in the beginning. This is my favorite slide. Whatever you do, pretty please, with a cherry on top, do not mess with the Finanzamt. You probably will not have angry men with baseball bats show up at your doorstep if you do not pay your taxes on time. But it is still going to be uncomfortable, it's going to cost you money, and it is just unnecessary. We do not want to be on bad terms with Finanzamt. So just do your research on what kind of taxes you have to pay for the legal entity you have chosen. Probably all of us here have to pay income tax, but depending on your legal entity, you might also have to pay VAT or something like Gewerbesteuer. When you register your business with Finanzamt, they will typically send you a letter where they explain exactly what kind of payment they expect from you and when. So just put that in your calendar as a recurring event and make sure you submit everything they want on time. If there's ever anything you are unsure about, simply pick up the phone and call your Finanzamt. Even though it might seem like a little bit of a scary institution, the people on the other end are just humans, and some of them are even friendly-ish. I once called my Finanzamt in absolute distress because it was time to submit my Einkommensteuervorauszahlung and I had no clue what I had to do. And this woman on the other end with this like super thick Berlin dialect, first of all told me to calm the fuck down and then explained everything I had to do step by step. Let's talk about expectations and timelines. I found it quite helpful to give myself a time frame during which I simply did not allow myself to quit freelancing. I told myself I would try freelancing for at least 1 year, no matter what. Freelancing can feel a little bit like a roller coaster ride, especially at the beginning. For me, things got a little bit rocky around the 3 months mark, which was when my first project ended and I really struggled to find another client. That moment wasn't just about not having any paid work. It really messed with my self-esteem and imposter syndrome hit me quite hard. I was wondering if I was even cut out for this and if I had made a huge mistake giving up a stable full-time job just to be my own boss. So at that point it was quite tempting to throw in the towel, but I didn't because the year I had agreed on with myself wasn't over yet. That time frame might be longer or shorter for you, and it also ties back to the point of your financial runway. You need to find what feels good for you. How long would you be comfortable living just off your savings? Alright, by now, you know why you want to go freelance, you have a beautiful financial plan, and you maybe negotiated a no-quit period with yourself. Now, it's time to start freelancing. How do we start freelancing? There's really only one thing we need, and that is that one first client. Client acquisition is probably the single most important and difficult task for all freelancers. There are different ways you can go about it. You can look for projects on freelance platforms, you can work with recruiters or headhunters, or you can try cold outreach. No matter how you try to find your clients, you need a solid online presence. You need a place where you can send people who are interested in working with you and where they can gauge your offer and your expertise. For many people that is LinkedIn, but it could also be another social media network, your personal website, a GitHub profile, or some sort of design portfolio. What matters is that your online presence showcases your expertise in a way that builds trust, that it is clear and relevant to your target audience. I personally use LinkedIn as my main online presence right now because it allows me to easily combine networking with showcasing my skills and describing my offer. I noticed a huge difference in both the quantity and quality of inbound leads once I really took the time to refine my profile and my offer. I now get more inbound leads, and most of them are actually relevant to what I do because from looking at my profile, it is immediately clear that I'm a freelancer and what exactly I can help potential clients with. Having an online presence is crucial, but I think there's one thing even more powerful you can tap into, and that is your network. Activating your network is a crucial and often overlooked way of finding your first clients. Even if you are new as a freelancer, you are not starting out from zero. Maybe you have been employed before and you already have a professional network from there. Maybe you collaborated with experts in your field on some sort of side project. Maybe you are a contributor in the open source community. Even if you are fresh out of school, you probably have teachers who can vouch for you, or maybe you were active in some sort of student initiative. The important part is, you need people who can speak to the quality of your work. You need people who will vouch for you. You need people who will mention your name in a room full of opportunities. So let your network know you are opening the doors of your freelance business. Someone from your network might have bits and pieces of work for you, and even if they don't, they might be able to introduce you to someone from their network who is looking for someone with just your skill set. These sort of warm introductions where someone you know introduces you to someone they know are solid gold. And that is also how I found my first client. I announced to my network that I'm opening the doors of my freelance business, and a former colleague of mine introduced me to one of his acquaintances who was looking for a freelance developer at the time. Even though that client and I did not know each other personally yet, there was already a base level of trust. He trusted me that I would get his project done, and I trusted him that he would pay the invoice. And when that first client paid the very first invoice I ever sent, I honestly had to stop myself from tearing up a little bit, because I just made money as a freelancer. And it was proof that what I was building for myself was actually working. There will inevitably come a time where you don't quite know what to do or how to continue. And that's another moment where your network can come in very handy. Depending on the problem you are facing, you might want to talk to other experts in your field, to other self-employed people, maybe to someone from your family, to a friend, or just another freelancer who is 2 steps ahead of you. So ask different people for their advice. Listen carefully, but also take everything with a grain of salt and make sure you find what works for you. Especially people who have never been self-employed, I guarantee you, will have a bunch of opinions on how you should run your freelance business. There will also be conflicting advice, especially at the beginning. Some people will tell you to open up a GmbH right away, others will tell you to avoid it at all costs. Some people will tell you to accept every project you can find, others will tell you to niche down as much as possible. So leverage your network, use it to your advantage, but also ask yourself how you can support others. I used to think that networking was a little bit sleazy, like images of middle-aged white men on the golf course kind of come to mind. But networking is actually a skill you can learn. And once you've mastered it, please don't feel bad for accepting opportunities that come your way through your network. By now you should have a rough idea of how you might approach finding your first clients. But client work is only one part of freelancing, and all the other tasks around it, that's actually where things get really interesting. You might, however, sometimes feel like you're just wearing too many hats. And that's where it can be quite helpful to have your board of advisors ready. I'm a software engineer, right? So I'm usually knee-deep in my code. But when I went self-employed, all of a sudden I was also the marketing intern, the social media manager, the CFO, the head of sales, my own chief of staff, and so many more roles. And often I had to jump back and forth between those roles multiple times a day. That can be quite tricky, especially when it sometimes feels like some of these roles are working against each other. As a solo freelancer, you will need to make every single decision regarding your business by yourself. All of a sudden, there's no more team lead or manager or colleagues you can consult. But that doesn't mean that you can't ask others for their advice. So when you are unsure about how to handle a situation, consult your board of advisors. Maybe you have some people from your network on your board. But your board could even include people you admire professionally but don't know personally. So when I'm looking at a problem regarding my finances, I might ask myself what Warren Buffett would do. For my social media presence, I look to this tech creator on the Instagram who creates really smart and witty videos and inspires me. When I'm faced with a technical challenge, I ask myself what Evan Yu would do, who created a super cool coding framework. And for tips on how to close new clients, I talk to a friend who runs a very successful agency and has mastered the art of networking. So the next time you are about to send a passive-aggressive email to a client because the payment is late yet again, just ask yourself, what would Oprah do? It might sound a little bit silly, but I think it can actually be quite helpful to have this imaginary board of advisors. There is one last thing I want to implore all of you to do, and you've already taken the first step by simply being here today, and that is to find yourself a community of like-minded people. Connect with others in your field by going to meetups and conferences, by being visible in the online world, by asking for help, and by supporting others. When I started out as a freelancer, my biggest fear was that I would be lonely without a permanent team around me. But actually, the exact opposite turned out to be true. I never felt less lonely and more included than I do right now. And that is mostly due to the amazing community of freelancers I have found, people like all of you today. I now call many people from both the Berlin freelance community, but also from my LinkedIn network, my friends. I go to meetups with some of them, I co-work with some of them, we have our freelance breakfast on Fridays, and I always have someone to ask for help. Sometimes these connections even turn into project opportunities eventually. I remember at some point someone reached out to me on LinkedIn and asked if I wanted to be a guest on his podcast, so I said, sure. That podcast appearance led to the two of us doing a live coding show on the YouTube with 2 full seasons, and eventually we ended up working on a huge and successful client project together. So just keep an open mind about these sort of opportunities coming your way, even if maybe it's not immediately clear how you might benefit from them. I think I wouldn't have survived my first year as a freelancer without all the amazing people who supported me, and I hope you can find these people for you. And again, freelancing can feel a little bit like a roller coaster ride, highs and lows, feast or famine. But during the high points, that's when I realized I did this, I built this for myself. And I wouldn't want to trade this feeling for anything. So, go forth, be your own boss, do not mess with the Finanzamt. And I think it's almost 5, so probably high time for a beer and start building some new connections. Let me check the time. I think we have time for a few questions. Cool, let's go. Do we have any questions?